It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have ourselves a good old hodgepodge. We've got some stuff on WrestleMania. We have an update on that curious clause about California in those UFC contracts. We've got some stuff on the Netflix possible deal with the UFC for broadcast rights. We're going to take a look at the very significant purchase that TKO announced over this past weekend with WrestleMania. We have some stuff on One Championship. I mean, there is a lot. And we also have a listener question as well, so we'll get that in there too. You'll get access to all of these things by subscribing. All of our bonus content will be yours when you subscribe. Now let's check in with John and see how he's been doing for the past few days.
Do you really want to know?
I do.
Oh, I'm exhausted. Had to get up early, take the car into the mechanic. Then I had to run my mom to go visit my aunt, went to the hospital. Then just a lot of stuff. Just cannot visit my girlfriend. So I got to make plans for that. It's just poor woe is me. Ran into a friend well, he's a friend, I guess, at the grocery store that I honestly did not want to see because he's a former junkie. But actually, I'm happy I saw him. He looked good. So that was nice.
Oh, that's good. And best wishes to your aunt as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that. So I apologize to anybody if they hear heavy yawning during the show, but I am exhausted. Did I mention that? I'm exhausted.
Well, we'll overlook it this one time. All right, so we're going to jump right in here, and we are going to get that update on the California clause about the UFC contracts. Remember, could you restate the clause and then tell us how we came by our information and what exactly the information is?
Well, in the UFC contracts, the current contracts, and also contracts from a couple of years, I guess the last few years they've been inserting this. In the section about independent contractors, it states that a fighter is an independent contractor. He's not an employee. There is a sentence that says that you agree to not do, if you have a bout booked, you will agree to not train for that bout in California. So that's the portion I found a little confusing, and I brought that up on the last week's show. And the only reason I spotted it is someone I had a newer contract I was looking through it for changes. I spotted that, went back to the old contract, realized, man, I had missed this in all the previous old contracts that we'd looked through, which we read on the show. We went through section by section.
Mm-hmm.
We even discussed that section about independent contractors, and we missed that sentence. It's snuck in there. So a listener who will remain anonymous because they're wanted by the feds, apparently, they offered a possible solution. I think part of this is probably accurate. And it's because in California, there's several regulations and rules and laws that means that workers in California are considered outside workers that come to California to do a job are fall under California law. So California law applies to those who are legal residents of other states but working in California. When physically present for work in California, the state's laws and protections apply. So, for instance, if a worker who lives out of state has a temporary work assignment in California, they're covered by California's employment law during the duration of their stay. I think this is probably accurate. This is probably the primary reason. I brought this up to other people in the industry and who do, the attorneys, contract law. They think this makes sense. The other portion that this person brought up suggested might be is that the California has they have a different ABC standard test for being an employee compared to an independent contractor. It's much more stringent. So from the California Chamber of Commerce, to determine whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee, California uses a strict 3-part ABC test that was first articulated in the 2018 California Supreme Court decision, Dynamex Operations West Inc. versus Superior Court of Los Angeles, and later codified into statute under Assembly Bill 5. Who can forget Assembly Bill 5? It was a big deal out here. Under the ABC test, an individual is presumed to be an employee unless the hiring company can prove that the worker, one, is free from control and directions of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in actually doing the work. 2, performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. And 3, is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work performed. And then failure to satisfy each of these 3 elements will result in an individual being classified as an employee. This one seems possible, but I'm less convinced that this is the reason, because if you look at that 3 requirements, it's still not guaranteed that a fighter would be considered an employee instead of an independent contractor. Boxers, for example, are classified as independent contractors in California. They've never crossed the line into employee status under the standard. So it's possible that's the concern. But I do think the first thing we talked about that California law applies is obviously the primary concern. And I think it either has to do with the employee status, or there's just a bunch of other rules in California that could apply. So this is a good start, but I'm not sure 100% that this fully explains everything. But it's possible, and it's more information than I had when I started. So I appreciate that.
WrestleMania happened this weekend, and a very significant purchase by TKO was announced at WrestleMania. What was it, and why does it matter?
Well, over the weekend, TKO announced that they acquired Lucha Libre AAA Worldwide, better known as AAA, better known as something I'm not familiar with because I don't follow pro wrestling, but it's a massive promotion in Mexico, I guess. It's a big deal there. And this is a major acquisition, giving them another territory. And I guess it's a big story because they've acquired another promotion, something they haven't done for a while, something TKO had, the parent company UFC hasn't done for a while. So that's important. What's also interesting is the MMA draw. Zach Arnold had an article talking about something he'd heard, a rumor that they were going to go on a buying spree following this, that not just AAA, but New Japan possibly would be acquired from TNA, and even hinted at BKFC under the TKO banner. I'm not sure about that one, but the other 2, if they did that, that would be massive. And as much as I don't follow pro wrestling, I stopped watching it when that goddamn awful Ultimate Warrior showed up in like 87. This would be huge because one, if it happened, it resemble kind of like the takeover that Vince McMahon did in the 80s. It also would signal that TKO is not worried currently about the FTC or DOJ stomping or putting an end to any M&As, mergers and acquisitions. So that would be a strong signal. Although because of the current antitrust lawsuit, I don't see the UFC going back to acquiring any other promotions right now. I think that would be a bridge too far. But this would be a signal that they are not worried about the Trump administration standing in the way of the pro wrestling side of the company going out and acquiring promotions. So we will have to see, though, if those rumors turn out true. I guess the AAA is not a rumor, that actually happened. But if the other ones happen, then that what becomes somewhat big news for pro wrestling becomes a much bigger story.
Do you think if they are able to pick up TNA and New Japan, that will be kind of a nail in the coffin for AEW, their primary competition?
Well, I don't know if it'd be a nail in the coffin, but that would really put them in a corner in a box where their chance of growing would be very limited. Because as I know enough about pro wrestling since I used to watch as a kid and was really into it back then. And through just osmosis, because everybody on X, Twitter talks about it nonstop, the ability to get, your wrestlers rotating to other companies and back is a way you can develop talent and expand the talent base that you have access to. if they do that, then it limits the talent access that AEW has. It also puts WWE, TKO in a much stronger position with relation to Netflix, because if you look at it, the biggest markets apparently that Netflix is looking to expand into, that they're interested in, is Brazil, Mexico, Japan, and India. Well, two of these companies are Mexico and Japan, and the other one's North America, the United States. So you would cover a lot of the major places that they're trying to expand, and you'd be limiting AEW, I guess, foreign expansion if they had any thought of that, but also limiting the possibility of AEW forming alliances with other promotions outside the United States. So it would be, I don't want to say it'd be a death knell, final nail or anything in AEW, because they can probably carve out a niche, but it would make just it'd make their business model much harder, their task much more difficult in dealing with the WWE.
Dana White was in attendance and was soundly booed by wrestling fans. I mean, it was really like a long, drawn out 10, 20-second round of booing. Why do you think he was even there?
I think in some ways it was a marketing ploy, a branding play. You notice they had Mark Shapiro was supposedly there. Other elements of the TKO company were there. There was business partners, the Netflix executives were there. So I think that was a big part. They also, one of my guesses, they might have underestimated the crossover appeal of pro wrestling and WWE. I think in the past, there was a tremendous amount of crossover, and the success of the UFC is basically it owes it to the crossover from wrestling fans to the UFC back then. But over the years since The Ultimate Fighter, there's been a split, and my understanding is, and based on the evidence that the WWE and the UFC have come up with, is that something like 13%, I think is the current number, is the number of crossover fans that watch both per week or per month. So it's not a large amount of crossover. And I think over time we've seen that both sides have kind of decided they're not fans of the other entity. WWE fans, because they become committed to WWE. It's many of them are former UFC fans. In fact, they're wrestling fans, went to UFC, and after a while they get tired of it, went back to WWE. They're somewhat hostile, I think, of WWE invading their space again because of the years of animosity between the two. And UFC fans, they no longer want to be connected or linked to WWE for the most part. So I think there's some hostility between the two groups. And also the politics is the cliche, and it's probably true at this point, is WWE fans are much more liberal, much more family based, why UFC fans are much more young men, which they market to, much more conservative manosphere. That's two groups that don't really get along. And so you put that together, and you have TKO thinking that Dana White's a star. He'll be recognized and cheered on at the WWE event. I think they grossly underestimated or misunderstood who the people were that were showing up. The other possibility, and this was brought up, is there might be a large number of foreign fans coming for the WWE, the WrestleMania event. Now, foreign travel has plummeted, but if you already had tickets for this, you might have showed up anyways. And as we know, Donald Trump's approval rating is in the gutter. I mean, he is despised overseas in a lot of places. So if foreign travelers are coming to the WWE and a person shows up that's linked heavily to Donald Trump, it makes sense that the large number of the foreign-based fans there might be booing that person. So that's another possibility.
Dana White gave Stephanie McMahon an interview. What were the biggest takeaways from that interview?
Like, what a piece of crap show that is. That's number one. Number two is they already broke the premise. They said there's a no douchebag rule. I mean, maybe it was douchebags and I misheard the plural, and it's kind of like the no homers rule. And you could have one homer and you could have one douchebag. I mean, I gotta say one thing. I owe wrestling fans an apology because I make fun of them a lot because I'm no longer a wrestling fan. I haven't liked the WWF basically forever or any time. They destroyed my beloved AWA and then my second favorite NWA. But I kind of owe an apology if that's their reaction to Dana White, because they're one up on MMA fans if that's their reaction. But yeah, it was my number one takeaway. Do we really need another show like this? Another show that just completely ass kisses and repaints history to make powerful people look better? Apparently, yes, because that's why they have it. My other takeaway is that they had some stories about Vince McMahon blocking Dana, the UFC from getting on NBC. They could possibly be true, but it also could be possible that NBC is a suitor for the UFC now going forward, and they want to put them in a positive light. So, I never know what to believe when Dana White's talking. They kind of confirmed that Shane McMahon was looking at buying the UFC, but they also made it sound like it might have been grossly exaggerated. So I guess the big takeaways are that the show was as informative as you thought it'd be.
Turki Al-Sheikh was also in attendance at WrestleMania. Should we infer anything from this?
I think we can infer that he's going to bring back the tag team, the Sheiks. I gotta be honest. He did that. I might forgive him, because that would be if you're an AWA fan, you know who the Sheiks were. But no, I mean, I think we infer it's the TKO family showing up in kind of a moment to shine in their glory. And Dana White was all impressed with the size of the crowd and audience, and which is, I mean, Dana White, the UFC could do something like that all the time, but they're uninterested in spectacle. Dana White's been famous for not wanting, anything special about walkouts, picking all the music. So we will see if he picks up on the spectacle of the WrestleMania from this, if he does anything, brings any over to the UFC. But for Turki, I think, again, you have Netflix there, you have all their executives. He is part of the family now that they're going to do this TKO boxing. I think if people knew who he was, I think he would have been booed if the audience knew he was. So they should be probably happy about that, because it could ruin the relationship going forward. But here's the guy that works with the Saudi Arabia that gives them $50 million or something per premier live event in Saudi Arabia. So, they are catering to these type of guys to, the biggest event of the year. It's a great time to do victory laps with the company.
Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos was asked about the UFC broadcasting rights, and this is what he said. Our live event strategy is unchanged. We remain really focused on the big breakthrough events. Our audiences love them. Live is a relatively small part of our content spending. So what does that tell us?
If he's telling us exactly what he believes, then it tells us that perhaps the UFC, they have no interest in a large amount of UFC content because they only want to do the biggest events. So, but the other possibility is he's trying to send a message for people like the UFC and anybody else that's looking to get into live content that, we're not really interested. Don't ask for a lot. But truthfully, what the part that he's not saying is, we would have you nonstop live because, we want live content. It's hard to tell, what he really means, because these guys are always trying to sneak in messaging when they do this. But my take is, and this is just me, I do think the Netflix is not looking to be a major partner in live events for these. WWE is a little different because of its narrative style, because they have stories nonstop. It's like a weekly show. It's a little different than other live events. I think with the UFC, I think they will make an effort. Everybody seems hell-bent on getting Netflix to pick up the UFC. And Netflix knows that. They know the UFC wants them because of their reach, because they are the major platform now. They are the number one network in the world. If you want to expand and reach an audience, you want to be on Netflix. But I think Netflix knows that, and they're not going to pay $1 billion like the UFC wants, or even 900 million, whatever, for all the content. The pay-per-views, the UFC is asking for a ton. And the only way, if Netflix could easily afford, if they wanted to, those pay-per-views and put them on free on the channel, but I don't think that's their model. I think they would possibly pick up, let's say, 4 quarterly, which is they've talked before, 4 big events a year. That's been the talk, what they're talking about for boxing, but 4 big UFC events per year. UFC could load them they'd get a large amount of money for that, and then some other content on Netflix, and then the rest would go somewhere else. I think that's where I think if I'm reading between the lines, I think that's where it's leading us to. And the UFC is now bringing up all the other people, the suitors that are interested in their content, because they're trying to drive up the price. But it's pretty obvious to tell that they want to be on Netflix. That's the number one network they're looking to get on. This is kind of like how in the past they really wanted to be on ESPN because they knew ESPN could reach the fans they wanted to reach that they hadn't before. And I think Netflix now is taking that position basically away from all the other streaming channels or networks in the country or the world. They're that big. They're becoming the monopoly of streaming that they said that they set out to become.
Side question on that. Today, we experienced the fourth 1,000 plus point drop on the Dow. How many more of these? And today's was also the biggest one. They said it was the biggest one since 1932. So how many more days like this can happen before we start seeing possibly the UFC's broadcast rights deals sort of becoming lower and lower and lower? I mean, how many, and this is obviously an opinion question, but in your opinion, how many more days like this can sustain a big broadcast right deal? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!